Smart Silver Stacker here. Let's talk about inflation and why 2021 was a very important year when it comes to the topic of inflation. Now, inflation is something we've discussed on the channel before. It's a very relevant topic for those of us stacking silver and investing in physical metal. The reason that it's so important right now, it's really ramping up. Inflation is getting out of control. Now, you've probably seen some headlines about how 2021 had the worst inflation rate since 1982. That has really been a common narrative. If you're just going by the official CPI numbers, that is the case. The CPI for 2021, year over year, we had 7% inflation. And you have to go back to 1982 to find a time when inflation was that high. But the thing is that the actual worst CPI on record was in the year 1980, and that's the same year that gold hit $800, which was a record high at that time. It was also the year that silver hit $50. And the CPI that year was 13.1, so almost double the CPI that we had in 2021. But here's the thing. The CPI number is not calculated the same way now that it was in 1980. There have been a bunch of adjustments to the formula, things like hedonic adjustments, substitutions of products, and that basically means that, if the price of steak goes too high, they'll substitute in chicken in their calculations. Or hedonic adjustments is, the price of a car has gone up quite a bit, but now you get power locks and AC as standard features, so you're getting more value, so we're not going to count those price increases as much. And there's a lot of manipulation of the CPI numbers. It's designed to understate inflation. Luckily, we can still use the formula that was applied in 1980, and John Williams over at shadowstats.com actually has that information available, and he's got this chart here that shows the official CPI rate compared to if we just were to stick with the calculations that were used in 1980. And you can see that if we're going to do an apples to apples comparison of inflation rates, if we go ahead and use the same methodology to calculate the CPI over the course of time, the rate in 2021 was actually 15%, right around there, which would actually make 2021 the year that had the highest inflation rate since the current fiat monetary standard was established. Of course, the current fiat monetary standard is the reason for all of this inflation. In 1971, Richard Nixon suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. At that time, he said it was temporary.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
But 50 years later, and we still have the convertibility suspended. So he effectively put us on a fiat monetary standard with a fiat US dollar as the world reserve currency. And of course, this hasn't always been the case. If you go back, the dollar actually used to be backed by hard currency. And you can see on this $1 bill from 1957, it actually says silver certificate up at the top. It's not a Federal Reserve note. And this certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. But of course, that time is gone now. The time of sound currency and having this right here be a dollar. This is a dollar that used to circulate, this peace dollar here, minted in 1922. And this and a dollar bill at one time were no different from one another. Of course, now you're going to have to pay, maybe $30 to pick one of these up. The silver content isn't worth quite that much, but there's a premium on these as coins. But regardless, this isn't worth a dollar anymore. It's worth quite a bit more. And that is because of all the money that has been created by the Federal Reserve since 1971. And specifically, over the past 2 years, a tremendous amount of currency has been created. And that is the reason that 2021 had the highest inflation rate ever under this current monetary standard. So you won't hear that in the media a lot. Of course, they're going to go by the official CPI numbers, but I think it is important to note that if you calculate inflation the same way, 2021 was actually worse than 1980, the worst year on record as far as inflation goes. Again, 1980 was the year that gold hit $800. It was the year that silver hit $50. And the fact that metals prices are where they are, now we've got gold over $1,800, and yet silver languishing under 25. And to me, I think that this is a real solid indicator of just how undervalued silver is at the moment. Now, I get comments on the channel all the time about how, silver is under 25 bucks, so it's a terrible investment. The fact that it's under 25 bucks and it hasn't performed is a sign that silver is a poor investment. But to me, silver under 25 bucks is a value investor's dream. Right now, I would say you will be hard pressed to find a more undervalued asset than physical silver. And there's also plenty of derivatives of silver that are extremely undervalued at these prices as well. Silver stocks, silver mining stocks specifically, those guys own a bunch of silver that's in the ground. And at current prices, they trade at an extreme discount, I think, to what their real fair value is. I think it's important to remember the quote from Warren Buffett that price is what you pay, value is what you get. At under 25 bucks, I think that you can get just a tremendous amount of value for physical silver bullion. Silver is really cheap here. And what you're getting when you buy physical silver bullion, this is the world's most versatile industrial metal. You need this stuff to make cell phones. You need this stuff for green energy. If you want to make wind turbines or solar panels or electric vehicles, you need quite a bit of this stuff. And that is the direction that we are moving in terms of energy and in terms of our economy. So the demand for silver is going to increase as time goes on. And don't forget that silver is also a monetary metal. It's a store of value. It's been used as money for millennia. And it wasn't that long ago that in the US we used silver as a monetary metal, and that the US dollar was actually defined by a weight of silver. With all the money creation and all the inflation, I think a lot of stackers out there, myself included to some extent, are wondering why silver hasn't moved. Why is it under 25 bucks? Well, I think part of the answer to that question is that all of this money creation that we've seen has just not gone into precious metals yet. A lot of it has gone into asset bubbles. Houses are astronomically priced, real estate is way up, tech stocks, cryptocurrencies, all of those things have gone up to sky high valuations and sky high multiples. And yet not much of that money has flowed into precious metals. But I really think it's just a matter of time before those currents reverse and people realize what's going on with our monetary system. We've got $30 trillion in debt just about now, record high inflation. Last year was the year with the highest inflation ever. Keep that in mind. And although people may not be aware of that yet, and I think a lot of that has to do with things like the CPI number being calculated in a way to obfuscate and minimize inflation, investors and the public at large haven't really come to terms with what all of this inflation is going to mean, but they're going to soon, because it is entering the mainstream and it's becoming too much of a problem to ignore. Even the Federal Reserve admits that this is no longer a transitory problem. And their solution has been to talk up these tapering and Fed tightening policies, but I think it's really important to remember that everything that's on the table as far as what the Fed has discussed, none of it is hawkish or tightening in any way. All it is being a little bit less dovish and a little bit loose with monetary policy. They're talking about ending asset purchases, which is basically just debt monetization, and they're talking about raising interest rates maybe 2% over the next 2 years. I think it's important to keep in mind that Paul Volcker had to raise interest rates well over 10% during our last bout of significant inflation in the early 80s in order to get inflation under control. And today's Fed is talking about raising rates 2 points. So that's clearly not going to be sufficient to bring down inflation when inflation now is higher than it's ever been before. But one thing it has been showing that it's going to do is that a lot of these bubbles that we have, like in tech stocks and crypto, those may be deflated a little bit. So far in 2022, we've seen a big move out of speculative tech stocks, and a lot of cryptos have suffered as well. There's been a pullback in Bitcoin. Cryptos have had a rough start to 2022, and I think that's going to continue. And gold now is over $1,800, and silver's had a little bit of a rally. You know, we're right around the $23 level now. No big moves yet. But I do think that the time is coming when investors are going to wise up to what is going on with the debasement of the dollar. And when that time comes, there's going to be a rush into metal. And, you know, some folks may go for derivatives like futures contracts or ETFs, that sort of thing. Myself, I feel a lot safer being in the physical metal. We know that on paper markets like, the COMEX, commodities exchanges, hundreds or thousands of times the actual amount of underlying physical metal is traded in the form of derivative paper contracts. And if there ever comes a point where everybody wants to get their hand on the physical underlying metal, and that may well be the case if we get a debt crisis or if inflation really gets out of control, people are going to realize that it's a game of musical chairs and there just aren't enough seats. And physical metal, like this coin here, or like its modern equivalent, an American Silver Eagle, may just become almost impossible to obtain. Or in order to obtain them, you may have to pay some absolutely ridiculous premium over the spot price of paper silver. So, you know, none of these videos are ever investing advice. You guys got to do your own due diligence. None of this should be considered advice. I'm just telling you how I feel about things and my thoughts on things. And for me, silver under $25 represents just an astronomical value, considering that the year we just got through was the worst year for inflation that we have ever experienced under the current 50-year-old aging fiat monetary standard. And you know, as far as fiat currencies go and the dollar goes, 50 years is a little bit long in the tooth for a fiat currency. The dollar status as the world reserve currency, I think, is its days are numbered. You know, when the time comes for the dollar to no longer be the world's reserve currency, maybe folks will be looking for an alternative fiat currency, but I think that there's also a possibility people will look to the historical stores of value, gold and silver, precious metals, and I do think that when that time comes, silver will have its day and the price will move much, much higher relative to other assets than it is now. And I think it's just a fire sale right now and a huge opportunity. And so that's why I'm going to still be stacking more. Let me know what you guys think. Am I completely off base with thinking that silver is the most undervalued asset in the world at the moment? Am I just a goof for using the 1980 formula for CPI? Do you think that inflation in 1980 actually was worse than last year? Do you think that the current CPI is accurate? I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys all very much for watching. And if you want to learn more about physical gold and silver, if you want to see some of the other types of physical silver you can be investing in and my thoughts on those, then check out these videos right here. And I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker